The stars hung silent in the darkness of deep space, untouched and eternal. For thousands of years the galaxy had known peace. The Concordat maintained order across hundreds of worlds, and every species followed the ancient rules without question. Warships could be no longer than 800 meters. Crews numbered no more than 2,000 souls. Weapons had to be visible, proportional, and designed with restraint. The ships that crossed the void were elegant things, sleek and beautiful, speaking of civilization and wisdom. They were vessels of a peaceful age. Ambassador Kelvin had seen countless ships in his 40 years of service. He knew every class, every design, every proud tradition of Concordat engineering. His own diplomatic vessel, the Harmony's Voice, represented the finest craftsmanship his people could offer. Its silver hull gleamed in the starlight, its lines perfect and mathematical. So when his sensors began screaming warnings, he assumed they were broken. "Morel, check the scanner array," he said calmly to his second-in-command. "Something is interfering with our readings." Morel was young, barely 10 years in diplomatic service, but she knew her equipment. Her long fingers danced across the controls, running diagnostic after diagnostic. Her face grew pale. "Ambassador, the scanners are functioning perfectly." "That's impossible. They're showing a vessel nearly 5 kilometers long." "I know, sir." Kelvin stood from his chair and walked to the main view screen. "Show me." The screen flickered to life and Kelvin's breath caught in his throat. It hung in space like a wounded mountain. The ship, if it could even be called a ship, stretched across the stars in a way that defied every principle of engineering Kelvin had ever learned. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't sleek. It looked like someone had taken a space station, welded it to an industrial mining platform, strapped massive engines to the back, and covered every surface with thick armor plating. Gun batteries bristled from its hull like the spines of some deep-sea creature. Sensor arrays jutted out at odd angles. Sections of the hull didn't even match, as if different parts had been built separately and then forced together. "Sir, I'm reading 47,000 life signs aboard that vessel," Morel whispered. Kelvin gripped the back of his chair. 47,000. That was more than his entire homeworld's military fleet carried combined. What species could possibly build something like this? Before Morel could answer, the view screen changed. A human male appeared, wearing a dark uniform with simple insignia. He had short brown hair going gray at the temples, a weathered face marked with old scars, and eyes that seemed to constantly calculate threat assessments. "Concordat vessel, this is Captain James Reed of the United Human Space Force ship Indomitable. We received your request for first contact. Welcome to human space." Kelvin straightened his robes and forced his voice to remain steady. "Captain Reed, I am Ambassador Kelvin of the Galactic Concordat. We are honored to make first contact with your species. However, our sensors must be experiencing some malfunction. They indicate your vessel is..." He paused, unsure how to phrase it politely. 4.7 kilometers long, Captain Reed said without hesitation. "Yes, sir. She's our first deep space colony ship. We started construction 50 years ago. Finished her last month." The diplomatic cabin fell silent. Kelvin could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "You're first?" he finally managed. "Yes, sir. We have 6 more under construction at various shipyards throughout the Sol system. The Relentless should be finished within 2 years." Morel made a small noise that might have been a whimper. Captain Reed's expression softened slightly. "Ambassador, you're welcome to come aboard. I know our ship design must seem unusual to you. We've prepared a hangar bay for your vessel. I think it would be easier to explain in person." Kelvin nodded slowly, not trusting his voice. 20 minutes later, the Harmony's Voice glided through a massive opening in the Indomitable's hull. The hangar bay stretched out before them, vast and industrial. Kelvin did a quick mental calculation and realized his entire ship could fit inside this one bay 6 times over with room to spare. Work crews and mechanical exoskeletons moved cargo containers the size of small buildings. Military aircraft sat in perfect rows along one wall. Transport vehicles drove across the deck, carrying supplies to different sections. The scale of it all made Kelvin dizzy. When he stepped onto the deck plating, he felt the pull of artificial gravity that should have been impossible on a moving vessel this large. The air was slightly cool and smelled of machinery and recycled atmosphere. Captain Reed stood waiting, his hand extended in the human greeting gesture. Kelvin clasped it carefully. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable, Ambassador. I imagine you have some questions." Kelvin looked up at the hangar bay ceiling, dozens of meters above his head. He looked at the crews working with casual efficiency. He looked at the massive blast doors that could seal this entire section off from the rest of the ship. "Captain Reed," he said slowly, "what exactly did your species build here?" Reed's smile was slight but genuine. "We built what we always build, Ambassador. Something that will keep working when everything else has failed." The tour began in what the humans called Engineering Section Alpha. Lieutenant Grace Miller led the way, her boots clanging on metal deck plates that seemed unnecessarily thick. She was a stocky woman with short red hair, grease stains on her uniform, and an enthusiasm that made Kelvin increasingly nervous. "This is Reactor Bay 3, she announced, gesturing at a massive chamber filled with humming machinery. "One of our primary power systems." Morell studied her scanning device, then checked it again. "Lieutenant Miller, this single reactor produces enough energy to power a Concordat battle station." "Oh, this is just one of 12 primary reactors," Grace said cheerfully. "We also have 18 backup systems distributed throughout the ship." Kelvin's translator chip struggled with the math. "You have 30 power generation systems? For one vessel?" Grace laughed, a sound that echoed off the metal walls. No, Ambassador. We have 47 reactors total. I'm just showing you the main engineering base. Each major section of the ship can operate independently for up to 50 years if it gets cut off from the primary power grid." "Why would sections of your ship be cut off?" Kelvin asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Grace started counting on her fingers. "Hull breaches, enemy boarding parties, dimensional anomalies, catastrophic system failures, crew mutiny, hostile alien possession, reality warping phenomena, quantum cascade failures." She paused. "Should I continue?" "None of those things happen in modern spaceflight," Kelvin said firmly. Grace exchanged a knowing look with Captain Reed, who had been following silently. "Ambassador, they don't happen to you. Yet." They moved deeper into the ship. Every corridor seemed designed for warfare. Blast doors every 50 meters. Emergency bulkheads that could seal instantly. Weapons lockers built into the walls at regular intervals. The Concordat delegation passed crew members who carried sidearms as casually as Kelvin carried his data pad. "Why is everyone armed?" Morell whispered. A young human male overheard her. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, with bright eyes and a quick smile. "Standard protocol, ma'am. You never know when you might need a weapon. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." The medical bay made Kelvin feel physically ill. It stretched across 3 entire decks and could handle 10,000 casualties simultaneously. Operating theaters lined the walls. Stasis pods for critical patients numbered in the hundreds. Supply rooms contained enough medical equipment to outfit a planetary hospital. "You built this ship expecting massive casualties," Kelvin said quietly. Captain Reed nodded. "We built this ship expecting reality, Ambassador. Accidents happen. Combat happens. Disease happens. We prepare for all of it." The armory was worse. Row after row of weapons, from small arms to ship-mounted artillery pieces stored as spares. Ammunition stocks that could supply a ground war for years. Protective gear for every conceivable threat. "This is a warship," Kelvin accused. "You said it was a colony vessel." "It's both," Reed replied calmly. "Our colony ships have to be able to defend themselves and their settlers. The galaxy might be peaceful now, but our colonists will be on their own light years from help. They need to be self-sufficient." Grace led them to the food storage sections next. Massive hydroponic bays growing fresh vegetables under artificial sunlight. Protein synthesis laboratories. Storage chambers with enough preserved rations to feed the entire crew for 200 years. 2 centuries of food? Morell breathed. The longest Concordat voyage in history was 3 years. "Things go wrong," Grace said simply. "Engines fail. Navigation systems break. You might get stranded. We make sure our people can survive until rescue arrives, even if rescue takes a very long time." The life support systems had 7 independent backup layers. The navigation computer had 5 redundant cores that could operate separately if the primary network failed. The hull armor was meters thick in places where Concordat vessels used centimeters. By the time they reached the observation deck, Kelvin felt overwhelmed. He stood at the massive window looking out at the stars, trying to process everything he had seen. "You over-engineer everything," he said, not making it a question. Commander Margaret Stone, the ship's executive officer, joined them. She was a tall woman with gray-streaked black hair and a calm demeanor that somehow made her more intimidating than if she had been aggressive. "We engineer things to survive, Ambassador," she said. "There's a difference." "But why?" "The galaxy has been at peace for thousands of years. These precautions seem excessive, paranoid even." Margaret smiled sadly. Do you know what Earth is like, Ambassador Kelvin? A pleasant world, I assume. Most homeworlds are. Earth has tried to kill humanity since we first evolved. Ice ages that covered half the planet. Supervolcano eruptions that blotted out the sun for years. Asteroid impacts that caused mass extinctions. Diseases that wiped out millions. And that's not counting what we did to ourselves. We nearly destroyed our own species with nuclear weapons 3 separate times. She turned to face him fully. We don't over-engineer because we're paranoid, Ambassador. We over-engineer because our entire history is a lesson in what happens when you're not prepared. Every backup system, every redundancy, every excessive safety measure exists because somewhere in our past, people died when those things didn't exist. Captain Reed stepped forward. We're not trying to frighten you. This is just how we build. We hope for the best, plan for the worst, and make sure our people can survive anything in between. Kelvin looked back at the massive ship surrounding them. A ship designed by survivors who remembered every catastrophe their species had endured. A ship that assumed the universe was hostile until proven otherwise. Your species terrifies us, he admitted quietly. We know, Reed said. But we'd rather terrify you and keep our people alive than build pretty ships that fail when it matters most. The Concordat Council chamber filled with anxious voices. Holographic projections of leaders from 70 different species floated in a circle, each one discussing the human problem. Ambassador Kelvin stood in the center, having just finished his report on the Indomitable. This cannot be permitted, declared Council Leader Vorin, his crystalline form shimmering with agitation. A vessel of that size threatens the very balance of power we have maintained for 10,000 years. They claim it is merely a colony ship, another council member argued. A colony ship with enough firepower to level a continent. Vorin's voice rose. They violate every convention of civilized spaceflight. Kelvin held up his hand for silence. With respect, Council Leader, the humans do not see their vessel as a weapon of conquest. They genuinely believe they are simply being prepared. Prepared for what? We have eliminated all major threats to galactic civilization. That is precisely what troubles me, Kelvin said quietly. They do not believe the threats are gone. They believe we have simply forgotten about them. Back on the Indomitable, Commander Margaret Stone sat across from Kelvin in a small meeting room. The walls were bare metal, functional and plain. Even the furniture seemed designed to survive damage rather than provide comfort. The Council is frightened of us, Kelvin said, not making it a question. Margaret poured 2 cups of coffee, a human beverage she had introduced him to. We expected that. New species always react this way when they see our ships. You have encountered other civilizations? No, you are our first contact with aliens. But we have encountered each other enough times throughout history. Humans fear what they do not understand. We assumed other species would be the same. Kelvin sipped the bitter drink and tried not to grimace. The Council wants you to scale back your ship designs. Make them smaller, less heavily armed, more in line with Concordat standards. Margaret set down her cup carefully. Her eyes hardened. No. Commander Stone, please understand the position this puts us in. Your ships terrify the entire galaxy. If you want to join galactic civilization. We want to join, Margaret interrupted. But we will not make ourselves vulnerable to do it. Vulnerable? The Concordat has maintained peace for millennia. And we are very happy for you. Margaret's voice remained calm but firm. But humanity has a saying, peace is the gap between wars. We will not throw away our ability to protect ourselves just because the current moment is peaceful. Kelvin felt frustration building. You prepare for threats that do not exist. We prepare for threats that do not exist yet, Margaret corrected. There is a difference, Ambassador. Every weapon system on this ship was designed for a threat we had never encountered. But we designed them anyway because we learned long ago that the universe does not warn you before it tries to kill you. This is madness. You cannot live your entire civilization in fear of hypothetical dangers. Margaret stood and walked to the wall, where a screen showed an image of Earth. The blue and green world looked peaceful from space, beautiful even. Do you see that planet, Ambassador? It looks calm, doesn't it? Safe. It appears to be a garden world. That garden world has glacial periods that cover half its surface in ice every 100,000 years. It has volcanic systems that can trigger global winters. It has weather patterns that spawn storms capable of destroying cities. It has tectonic plates that shift and create earthquakes that level mountains. Margaret turned back to him. And that is just the planet itself. That does not count the asteroids, the solar radiation, the diseases, or the 1,000 other ways Earth tries to kill anything living on it. Surely other worlds have challenges. Not like Earth. We have checked the records you shared with us. Most Concordat homeworlds are stable. Come. They do not have mass extinction events every few million years. They do not force their inhabitants to evolve or die. Margaret sat back down. Humanity spent 200,000 years learning a simple lesson. The universe does not care if you survive. You survive because you make yourself too stubborn to kill. Kelvin was silent for a long moment. The Council will not accept this. They will demand you comply with Concordat standards. Then we will decline to join the Concordat. You would turn away from galactic civilization over ship designs? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Ambassador, try to understand. These ships are not about pride or power. They are about survival. Every human aboard this vessel knows someone who died because something failed at the wrong moment. Every family has stories of disasters that could have been prevented with better preparation. We build the way we do because our history is written in the blood of people who were not prepared enough. Captain Reed entered the room, his face grave. We have a problem. Long-range sensors picked up something unusual in Sector 7. The Concordat fleet station there is sending distress signals. Kelvin checked his communication device. His face went pale. That is impossible. Those signals, they match historical records from 10,000 years ago. What is it? Margaret asked. The Void Swarm. An extragalactic threat that nearly destroyed galactic civilization before the Concordat was formed. But they were eliminated. Completely wiped out. Reed and Margaret exchanged a look. Nothing is ever completely wiped out, Reed said quietly. How long until we can reach Sector 7? 8 hours at maximum speed, the navigation officer reported over the intercom. Set course immediately. All hands to battle stations. Reed turned to Kelvin. Ambassador, your elegant Concordat vessels are about to face something they were not designed to handle. Our monster ship, as you call it, was built for exactly this kind of situation. Margaret stood, her expression calm but determined. You wanted to know why we over-engineer everything, Ambassador? You are about to find out. The Indomitable tore through space at maximum speed, its massive engines pushing the ship faster than anything its size should have been able to move. On the bridge, Captain Reed stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with the calm expression of a man who had prepared for this moment his entire career. Entering Sector 7 in 30 seconds, the helmsman reported. Kelvin stood off to the side, his skin pale. He had sent messages to the Council warning them about the Void Swarm's return, but part of him still hoped the sensors were wrong. The Void Swarm was a nightmare from ancient history, a terror that had nearly ended all life in the galaxy before being destroyed 10,000 years ago. The view screen flickered to life and Kelvin's last hope died. Space was filled with them. Thousands of writhing biomechanical creatures, each one the size of a small ship. They looked like someone had crossed insects with machines and given them the ability to survive in vacuum. Razor-sharp limbs extended from segmented bodies covered in dark armor plating. Energy weapons grew from their bodies like organic tumors. They moved in coordinated swarms, flowing through space like schools of predatory fish. And they were tearing apart the Concordat fleet. 3 Concordat battleships floated dead in space, their elegant hulls ripped open. 2 more were still fighting, their precision energy beams lancing out at the swarm. For every creature they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The Concordat ships were designed for civilized warfare, for battles between rational opponents who followed rules. The Void Swarm followed no rules. This is Concordat Fleet Command to any vessels in range, a desperate voice crackled over the speakers. We have lost 60% of our forces. We need immediate assistance. Repeat, we need. The transmission cut off as another Concordat ship exploded in a ball of plasma. All weapons to full power, Reed commanded, his voice steady. Raise all shield layers. Seal every section of the ship. Non-essential personnel to emergency stations. Throughout the Indomitable, blast doors slammed shut. Weapons crews ran to their posts. Engineers activated every backup system the ship possessed. Medical teams prepared for mass casualties. In 3 minutes, the ship transformed from a colony vessel into a fortress ready for war. Captain, we have incoming, the tactical officer reported. 300 Void Swarm creatures breaking off to engage us. Let them come. All batteries fire at will. Overlapping fields of fire. I want nothing getting through. The Indomitable did not maneuver gracefully like the Concordat ships. Instead, it planted itself in space and became a wall of weapons fire. Dozens of gun batteries opened up simultaneously, filling the void with explosive rounds, energy beams and missile salvos. The ship had been designed with every weapon system humanity could imagine, and now all of them fired at once. Void swarm creatures died by the dozens, but more kept coming. They slammed into the Indomitable's shields, their energy weapons carving into the protective barriers. Alarms blared across the bridge. "Shields down to 70%, the tactical officer called out. "Rotate shield harmonics. Bring up the secondary shield layer. Tertiary layer on standby," Reed ordered. The maneuvers were instinctive, practiced 1,000 times in simulations. The humans had trained for battles they had never fought, against enemies they had never seen. A cluster of void swarm creatures broke through the shields and crashed into the hull. Their razor limbs tore through armor plating, ripping into decks 47 through 53. "Hull breaches on multiple decks," someone shouted. But the Indomitable had been built for this. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off the damaged sections. The crews in those sections activated their local power systems and kept fighting, isolated but still functional. Exactly as the ship had been designed to do. Grace Miller worked in Reactor Bay 7, her hands flying over the controls as she rerouted power around damaged systems. The entire bay shook with impacts, but the reactor kept running. "I told them we needed the redundancies," she shouted over the noise. On the bridge, Commander Margaret Stone coordinated the defensive effort with practiced efficiency. "Concentrate fire on Grid 7 Alpha. Medical teams to Deck 49. Engineering, I need those shield generators back online." The battle raged for 8 hours. The Indomitable absorbed punishment that should have destroyed any ship. Sections of hull plating were torn away. 3 reactor systems went offline. Casualties mounted into the hundreds. But the ship kept fighting. Where the elegant Concordat vessels had fallen to coordinated void swarm attacks, the human ship refused to die. Every backup system activated. Every redundant weapon found its purpose. Every excessive safety measure proved necessary. Captain Reed watched a Concordat ship explode on the view screen. "Tactical, launch all remaining missiles. Target the center mass of the swarm." Hundreds of missiles streaked away from the Indomitable, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. They detonated in a chain reaction that lit up space like a new sun. Void swarm creatures died by the thousands. The remaining creatures began to retreat, flowing back toward the edge of the system. The human ship had hurt them badly enough to break their attack pattern. "All weapons continue firing until they are out of range," Reed ordered. "Do not let them regroup." As the last void swarm creature disappeared into the darkness, silence fell over the bridge. The crew remained at their stations, hands shaking from adrenaline, but still ready to fight. Kelvin stared at the view screen in disbelief. 5 Concordat ships destroyed. Nearly 3,000 of his people dead. But the Indomitable still floated in space, battered and scarred but alive. "Damage report," Reed said quietly. "Hull breaches on 17 decks. 3 reactors offline. Shield generators at 40% capacity. Casualties at 237 wounded, 41 dead," Margaret reported. "But all primary systems are still functional. We can continue fighting if needed." Reed nodded slowly. "Stand down from battle stations. Begin rescue operations for Concordat survivors. Medical teams prepare to receive wounded." He turned to Kelvin. "Ambassador, I am sorry for your losses. Your crews fought bravely." Kelvin could not speak. He had watched his people die in elegant ships designed for a peaceful galaxy. And he had watched humans survive in an ugly vessel designed for a universe that wanted to kill them. Margaret Stone approached him gently. "The Void Swarm proved something today, Ambassador. The threats are not gone. They were just waiting. And when they came back, our paranoid over-engineering was the only thing standing between them and complete victory." Outside the view screen, human damage control teams began moving through the wreckage, searching for survivors. The Indomitable might be scarred, but it was already beginning to repair itself. Kelvin finally found his voice. "You were right. About everything." The Indomitable limped back toward Concordat space 3 days after the battle. Repair crews worked around the clock, welding new hull plates over the damaged sections and restoring systems that had been torn apart. The ship looked even uglier than before, covered in fresh scars and emergency patches, but it was still flying. Ambassador Kelvin stood on the observation deck, watching the repair teams work in the void outside. He had not slept properly since the battle. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Concordat ships exploding, their elegant designs no match for the horror of the void swarm. Captain Reed joined him at the window, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Kelvin without a word. How many did we lose? Kelvin asked quietly. Final count from all Concordat vessels, 2,843 dead, 1,200 wounded. Reed's voice was heavy. We pulled out 600 survivors from the wreckage. Your medical teams are doing good work. And your losses? 41 dead, 237 wounded. Most of them in the sections that were breached. Reed sipped his coffee. It should have been worse. Would have been worse in a ship designed differently. Kelvin turned to face the human captain. The council wants to speak with you. They have been sending messages for 2 days. I know. I have been busy keeping my ship together and my crew alive. Reed's tone was not apologetic. But I will speak with them now. We are entering communication range. An hour later, the Concordat Council assembled in holographic form aboard the Indomitable. 70 species, their leaders floating in the ship's conference room. Council leader Voron's crystalline form was dimmer than before, as if the light inside him had faded. Captain Reed, Voron began, his voice lacking its usual authority. The Concordat owes humanity a debt we cannot easily repay. Your vessel saved countless lives and prevented the void swarm from spreading to other systems. Reed stood at attention. We did what needed to be done, Council Leader. Any ship would have responded the same way. No, Voron said firmly. Any ship would have died like ours did. Your ship survived because of the very design features we criticized. The redundancies we called excessive. The weapons we called aggressive. The armor we called paranoid. He paused. We were wrong. Commander Margaret Stone stood beside Reed. With respect, Council Leader, you were not wrong about what our ships are. You were only wrong about why we built them this way. Another council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature, spoke up. We have reviewed the battle recordings. Your crew fought with remarkable efficiency. Every system that seemed wasteful proved necessary. Every backup that seemed redundant was used. How did you train for threats you had never encountered? We trained for everything we could imagine, Margaret explained. And then we trained for things we could not imagine. Our history taught us that the worst disasters are always the ones you did not prepare for. So we prepare for everything. Kelvin stepped forward. The Council would like to make a formal request. We wish humanity to join the Galactic Concordat as full members. And we would like to commission human engineers to help redesign our fleet. Reed and Margaret exchanged glances. We accept membership in the Concordat, Reed said. But we will not change how we build our ships. We would not ask you to, Voron replied. In fact, we are asking you to teach us your methods. The Void Swarm returned once. There may be other threats we have forgotten about in our thousands of years of peace. We need to remember how to survive, not just how to maintain order. Over the following months, human engineers spread across Concordat space. They visited shipyards on dozens of worlds, sharing their design philosophy. The elegant alien engineers struggled at first with the human approach. But this is so much extra mass, one shipbuilder complained, looking at plans for redundant life support systems. A human engineer named Robert, a gray-haired man with patient eyes, smiled. Extra mass that keeps your crew breathing when the primary systems fail. Would you rather have a lighter ship or a living crew? The alien engineer had no answer to that. Slowly the galaxy began to change. New Concordat vessels launched with thicker hulls and backup reactors. Weapons systems designed for unknown threats. Medical bays that could handle mass casualties. Food storage for long-term emergencies. They were not as extreme as human ships, but they were no longer fragile works of art. They were vessels designed to survive. 6 months after the battle, construction began on the UHSF Indomitable II in high orbit above Earth. News of the project spread across the galaxy, and this time there was no fear in the reactions. There was relief. Kelvin visited the construction site with Margaret Stone. The new ship was even larger than the first, its skeleton stretching across the stars like the framework of a small city. It is bigger, Kelvin observed. We learned things from the battle, Margaret explained. Areas where we need more redundancy. Systems that could be better protected. The second ship will incorporate those lessons. Will it ever end? Will humanity ever build ships that are not designed for war? Margaret considered the question carefully. Our ships are not designed for war, Ambassador. They are designed for survival. And no, it will never end. Each generation will build better ships based on what the last generation learned. That is how we honor the people who died because their ships were not strong enough. She pointed at the construction crews working on the massive vessel. Somewhere out there in the galaxy, there are threats we have not discovered yet. Dangers we cannot imagine. And when they come, our ships will be ready. Not because we are aggressive or paranoid, but because we remember what happens when you are not prepared. Kelvin watched a construction team weld a massive armor plate into place. The galaxy called your first ship a monster. What will they call this one? I do not know, Margaret admitted. But I know what our crew will call it. They will call it home. A home that will protect them no matter what the universe throws at them. Below them, Earth turned slowly in space. The blue and green world that had spent millions of years trying to kill humanity had instead created a species that refused to die. They had taken every lesson their harsh planet taught them and built it into metal and machinery. The galaxy was learning those lessons now. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. Never apologize for wanting to survive. And in shipyards across 100 worlds, the sound of construction echoed through the void. The age of elegant, fragile vessels was ending. The age of survival had begun.